Someone that I met honestly on Twitter, but the dude seems like he's got a rich history here, and in some ways a man after my own heart. So I definitely wanted to get the chance to talk to him, and he's agreed to do so. His name is Jack Hunter. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be with you today. Been looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. Glad to meet you too for the first time, even though it's virtually. I'm sending a virtual handshake your way, as all good gentlemen should do it when they meet each other for the first time. But everyone, Jack has had a really interesting history. He started out as a radio broadcaster, sort of shock jockish, if I can use that old hack term. He's now currently at Based Politics, libertytree.com. You could also find him on Twitter. We'll get you all his info as we'll get that up on the screen and make sure we get to that. But, you know, his story to me is an interesting sort of life journey. And I wanted to talk to him a little bit about that. So, Jack, if you don't mind, let's start out at the beginning, as Homer said. As a younger man, I think, would it be fair to categorize you as a strictly conservative kid growing up, Southern based? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's that in a broad sense. That's one way of looking at it. My parents were not that political at all.
Mm-hmm.
They voted Republican because my dad was a business owner and liked low taxes. We never really talked
Right.
about cultural or social issues. I even think my parents were pro-choice. I was not raised religiously. The only time I went to church,
Mm-hmm.
grandmama, which is a couple times a year, and that you just did that because she was babysitting you, and that's what you did on Sunday morning.
Right. Right.
But when Rush Limbaugh's nationally syndicated show started, what was that, like 89, 90, 91? Somewhere.
I think it might have been earlier. Yeah, it might have been earlier. But yeah, around that time frame. Yeah.
We went national before, just the California. Mm-hmm. My mom would listen, and it wasn't because, once again, she was super political. It was new and different, and that's what people were listening to. And it was one summer between my junior and senior year of high school. I listened, and I really got addicted to it. I thought this was great. I'd never thought about. I liked punk rock to the degree that I thought about politics. I would have been considered far left, but you're a kid, you don't really know anything. But the punk and hardcore magazines I would read were all left wing politics, right? So I guess I got to be this if I like the Dead Kennedys and the Circle Jerks. This is what.
Right.
I didn't think much about it. I just liked the music. And then when I listened to Rush, I was like, man, I like a lot of what he's saying. I'm a kid. I don't know anything. It's all new to me. But I started becoming more politically minded. And like I said, I was a musician. I moved to Boston when I was 19. And most of you can tell to this podcast that I was born and raised in Boston from my accent. I'm kidding.
Right.
But I went up there, felt pretty isolated. I went up there for music. I was playing with a drummer I'd met in Charleston. Didn't really know what to do other than I love music and I was going to be a big rock star. You're 19. That's guaranteed, right? So you got to go to a bigger city. And when I say Charleston, I mean Charleston, South Carolina, not the West Virginia one.
Right.
And when I got there, there was a host. He's to this day my favorite political talk host of all time. And some you may or may not know him. Some people don't at this point. He's passed on. David Brudnoy.
Never heard of him.
He was like the voice of the Northeast on what was big mega. When he died, the mayor of Boston, Thomas Menino, declared it David Brudnoy Day. If that gives you any idea how much influence he had, he was a movie reviewer,
especially from Menino.
Right, exactly.
Especially from Menino, who was definitely nowhere near even close to being a moderate, let alone a conservative, right? So.
Right, exactly. But I mean, this guy was a hardcore libertarian, conservative guy, close friends with Bill Buckley, who would come on his program frequently. But a lot of these conservative figures I didn't really know about. He would interview. But long story short, when I went from South Carolina to there as a teenager and being a fish out of water in the Northeast, things that were conservative were more interesting to me, being in a blue area, coming from a red area. This host, who I thought was even better than Rush Limbaugh and more interesting as I started to get older, more thought-provoking, less simple, had a big influence on me. So my mind kept going in that direction. But the thing that really pushed me into where I ended up today, and we can talk about the trajectory here and in between, I know this is a longer program, is I was at Barnes & Noble. I was looking for books about politics. And I came across a book called The Conservative Mind by Russell Kirk.
Russell Kirk, yeah.
So many, Russell Kirk's not as big a name as Bill Buckley and American conservatism, but he was right there in the middle of National Review. He actually founded a quarterly called Modern Age that's still published today by ISI that predates National Review. Russell Kirk is the person most responsible, or solely responsible, for American right-wingers using the term conservative. Before the Conservative Mind came out in 1957, I think, Bill Buckley referred to himself as an individualist. Conservative was not a word that
Right.
but when Kirk wrote The Conservative Mind, that's the word that American right-wingers began to start using, and we're still using today.
They began adapting it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And The Conservative Mind is a book about everything from Edmund Burke to John Randolph of Roanoke, the founding era. It's a deep philosophical. Until The Conservative Mind, most people could understand there was a liberal tradition in the United States, but would say there's really no conservative tradition outside of occasional prejudices and bigotries that are coalesced into voting coalitions at times. That's how they would frame it. Kirk blew that out of the water. It's like, nah, here's why the founding fathers were conservative. He would compare the American Revolution to the French Revolution. The French Revolution was the Jacobites wanting to overthrow the old order, correct? The American Revolution was colonials wanting to preserve their British heritage, but rule themselves. He called that a conservative revolution. So obviously this went far beyond what I'd been listening to on Rush Limbaugh's show. When I saw The Conservative Mind at Barnes & Noble, I was like, oh, this book must be about how bad Bill Clinton sucks.
Right.
That's what I was looking for. I was 19, 20 maybe. And I bought it, and it was everything I just described. I'm like, whoa, there's a whole another world out there. This coincided with Pat Buchanan running for president in 1996 and winning the New Hampshire primary, which was the state next to me at the time in Massachusetts. I attended a lot of those speeches. I discovered Chronicles magazine, which is a paleo-conservative magazine that really was at its height in the late 90s. So all that coalesced around a young me just thinking about all these things and going in different directions, and also being outside the South. You touched on that. I started to appreciate, or at least and explore some of that more than I ever had prior or ever thought to. I never even thought about it. That's why I fell in love with country music, was being in Boston. And that Rick Rubin, Johnny Cash album came out. I'm like, this is great. Oh, who's that?
Oh, yeah.
Too. So it was all that going on with me at a young age, being in Boston.
So, Jack, let me ask you this. You said you started to explore being in Boston, being away from the South. Did you mean you started to re-examine your Southern heritage, or you started to examine like perceptions being outside of the South, say a more non-South or Northern, if you will, perception? When you said you started to examine that, what side of it were you examining at that point?
Well, both. So for one, I worked in a warehouse. I was a delivery truck driver, and they would call me country boy, which I've always had a thick skin. Even I didn't care. I thought it was funny. So I went out and bought cowboy boots, and I still wear cowboy boots to this day. I'm 49 years old, so that was good. But philosophically, in The Conservative Mind, Russell Kirk's first book was about John Randolph of Roanoke, who was a figure that was a little bit after the founders, but he considered him sort of an American Edmund Burke. But he was a Southerner. He was Virginian. But the part that probably hit me more was the study of the Southern agrarians, who wrote We'll Take Our Stand in the 1930s. Many I'm blanking out right now. It's been so long since I've thought about all this. But I didn't know they were arguing in a sort of anti-capitalistic, anti-libertarian way, which is, I'm a libertarian now pretty stringently, in markets and whatnot, that capitalism, industrialism was wiping away parts of the South. And look, a lot of them ignored slavery, and some might have embraced it. Like, we could talk about that. But at my young age, I was just a year and a half prior, I never thought about politics at all. And here I am thinking about, there's actually some things we're thinking about, or in the area I'm from, that might be positive and not all bad, because that's what it, and so that's where my mind went. And I had Russell Kirk and other thinkers in that realm sort of providing material that I was discovering upon happenstance about what they're saying. So, yeah. Yeah.
And really, when you say something like that, I can appreciate it, right? So you went from being essentially, and I mean this musically, a young punk in Boston, and being one myself in New York growing up, CBGB's scene and all that. I was going to say that, it's interesting. Like, people just assume that punk rock was leftist, and a lot of it was, and a lot of it was Marxist. But a lot of it was what I like to this day. I think that if you were to put a soundtrack to the libertarian thought process, it'd probably be a punk rock soundtrack, because they do have that strong streak of individualism, do it yourself. It's us against the world type of thing. So, like, when you meet the Ramones or not the Sex Pistols to some extent, but not the Clash, for example, right? You start to see that mix, right? Now, being in that sort of mindset, and I could certainly understand reading a book. Like, for me, it was Free to Choose.
Sure.
That formalized a lot of stuff. I mean, I had always been aware of the philosophical, John Stuart Mill, as you mentioned, Edmund Burke, John Locke, but when you saw when you kind of got that influence in you, and you saw that, you mentioned it as conservative, and for some, at least, the journey to libertarianism does come from the right. It does come from conservatism. I know there's roughly, I would say, an even number that come to it from the left, that start out being what used to be considered leftist strongholds, right? Like free speech, anti-war. Those used to be the province of the left, at least given our generation. Like you said, you're 49, I'm 58, roughly the same type of, growing up in the 70s and 80s type of thing. Things that are considered libertarian now, the absolutism around free speech, the no war,
right?
Those were from the left. So you could see where a lot of libertarians came from the left. Of course, where we largely disagreed with them would have been on economic issues, right?
Sure.
But so it's interesting, and I understand about reading a book, but I also, kind of looking at your history, got a sense, and tell me if I'm wrong or not, please, that you were also someone who was contrarian and who would lean into that contrarianism to put across a point, right, of your newfound understandings or appreciation of individualism, conservatism, libertarianism, whatever you want to label it at the time. So tell me about the League of the South, because, and I'll draw a parallel to that in modern day stuff, and hopefully, but the League of the South, you started a chapter, or you led a chapter of that. Is that correct?
I led a chapter in Charleston when that controversy happened in 2013. They said I was the head of it and took it global and all kinds of stuff that wasn't true. Some of that might be
okay.
Yeah, but what happened? What I was just talking to you about this fascination with Russell Kirk and sort of that generation of conservatives. So the League of the South was a group of professors, mostly Southern based, but not all. They called the sympathizers to Confederate things in the North Copperheads. This was all stuff I was learning on the fly at a young age. But a lot of these men knew Russell Kirk. Russell Kirk died, I think, in 94, 93, right when I was getting interested in all this stuff. But I thought it was cool that they knew him, if you catch my drift. So they were that Southern agrarian, they were secessionists, all that kind of stuff. And that's where my young mind went. I'm like, well, they knew Russell Kirk. I love all this stuff. Well, I want to get into this too. I'm already Southern, and in my household, we didn't have Confederate anything. Like, it just wasn't thought about. So I'm sure a lot of my family and friends thought I was pretty weird at that time. And I might have thought that self too at a younger age, or certainly now.
Right.
But, the details, what you're talking about, I formed a chapter. 8 people would meet at a seafood restaurant in the conference room on a Tuesday once a month. And we talk about how we can prevent the federal government from, some people, it was with pro-life issues, a lot of pro-weed people, pro-marijuana. I mean, that was our thing. And you had to be there to see it. Looking back, it just looked like a Ku Klux Klan thing or something like that. And I would certainly have never been a part of something that was actually that. And I could understand why people would think it was that. But it was basically a bunch of older guys who were professors, some of whom I think meant no ill will, but they thought it was in the late 90s proper to associate their cause of decentralization and resisting the federal government and individual rights, or however you want to look at it, with the cause of the Confederacy. Now, looking back, I can see how absolutely stupid that was. This is what I would have thought when I was 22 and a part of that. Oh, my black neighbor in South Carolina thinks the Confederate flag is bad. I'm going to go explain to them why it's not. Now, that probably sounds stupid to you, and it absolutely should. But that's what we thought. That's what I was encouraged to think. And I'm not blaming anybody else. I did this all on my own free will.
Right.
But now at my age, and for years now, certainly didn't arrive at this yesterday, I would think, well, I thought that at one time for these reasons. And how absolutely insane is it to think that you could explain to a person of color in South Carolina that that is anything less than a terrorist symbol? That's not their
Right.
experience. That's not what their grandfathers and great grandfathers and maybe even fathers and maybe even them experienced. And I just have a different perspective on it that I had to reach a certain level of maturity. And I don't claim to be mature even at close to 50, but it certainly changed my mind on a lot of that stuff. And I'm willing to talk as much or as little about it as you want. I wrote
No,
years ago explaining
and that's what no, and actually, I do know it's been at least 10 years, I think, since I think I read a couple of articles from that period by you and about you, where you did explain that, and I instantly kind of guessed at the situation. So correct me if I'm wrong, because I love to talk these sort of things out. Like,
Sure.
I sense that that especially at that time, maybe to a lesser extent now, you do have a certain like contrarian streak to you.
Sure.
And given the fact that you had your Southern Avenger persona as well, right? And we could talk about that in a second too. Because at that age, at your age, maybe not the same time period, maybe time shifted 10 years earlier, but I saw myself in a lot of those conversations where I would try to explain, I believe in states' rights. I could see where Lincoln, through his actions, really, some of them were unconstitutional.
Right.
And someone immediately jumping to the conclusion that, like, say, a liberal friend I might be talking with this about would jump to the conclusion, you're a racist. You supported slavery, you missed slavery. Would you have supported slavery back then, right? Which is always an asinine question. How could you answer that question without putting your shoes in the times, right? That would have happened. So I certainly understand that if you were trying to put a point across, people are drawing these conclusions about you. Some people might just immediately apologize and say no. Other people may double down, not because they are racist, but because they're like, no, that's not the point I'm trying to make, right? Did you find yourself like in that sort of situation that kind of got away from you? Because I could see where you could sit there and say, well, I'm not a racist. I don't support the concept of slavery. But guess what? If you're going to call me a racist, let me sort of lean into that to show you why I'm not. Is that what was going on, or was it not even that deep?
It wasn't that deep. And on the latter, to the degree that I did that, this is a major part I'm leaving out. I was on the radio as an anonymous here for years. I was on FM rock radio. I did political talk radio later. This is back when radio was a thing. I mean, we're probably pre-Napster. We're talking late 90s, early 2000s. I was on one of the most influential rock stations in the Southeast, 96 Wave FM. Anybody in Charleston of a certain age has a certain affinity for that. But the afternoon host, who was the most popular host, was a friend of mine. And we would go to a sports bar on Monday night and watch Monday Night Raw. That's what we do, WWE wrestling. I'm a huge wrestling fan.
There you go.
Doing all this League of the South stuff. Was going to the College of Charleston at the time. I went to college a little later. And we were just drinking. I was like, man, you should let me come on your program and, do some of I was writing for the school paper. I'll do some commentary about this. And he was wild. He's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. This guy's from Massapequa, New York, by the way.
Not too far from me now. Yeah, that's where my wife's from. But okay, fair enough.
He's 10 years older than me. We've been friends for years and music connections. And so we did. And it got popular. And I would do a little bit of what you just alluded to. I remember, and this was written about when the Washington Free Beacon came after me, the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson came out. And I think Spike Lee and the NAACP were condemning it and saying it was a whitewash of slavery, and they're probably right in retrospect. But I did some stupid thing about they should get whipped for saying that. So that would be an example of what you're talking about. I would never do that today. And was so young, I was like, yeah, I should do this. I'm on the road. They just played Smashing Pumpkins. Now I'm going to do this. Now here's, Pearl Jam or whatever. Like, that's the environment. I was judging wet T-shirt contests in a mask in bars on the weekend and getting paid to do that and free drinks. Like, that's, and the reason I wore the mask, in part, I was a wrestling fan. It was kitschy. Also, I was in local bands that were somewhat successful, and I like to keep the music separate from what I was doing on the radio. Now that radio station ended up playing my band's song as a single, and we'd have 600 people to show. So it was all interwoven because they knew who I
Right.
was, but the public at large did not know.
Right.
So maybe I'm getting a little off track here, but
No, you're not. This is fascinating to me because, like, my next question for you was the whole Southern Avenger, which especially at the time, was in line with the shock jock sort of format of radio. You did wear like a lucha libre mask, and you did call yourself the Southern Avenger, which I don't know. Were you aware of the fact? I'm sure you were, right? That John Wilkes Booth was also right. Was it based on the John Wilkes Booth nickname, or did you just was it a wrestling gimmick?
No, there was a popular host you might remember at the time, conservative talk host Ken Hamblin. He was the Black Avenger. He was a black conservative talk host. The stuff that guy said on the radio regularly outpaced anything I said as a Southern Avenger by far. Think about the late 90s, post OJ, LA riots.
Right.
I look back, I think it's shameful. I have black conservative and libertarian friends. We talk about this privately. The black conservatives that go out there and just feed into what white conservatives want to hear, the one friends would find that reprehensible. I'm a white dude. I find it reprehensible. But that's what this guy did in the 90s. And of course, I thought he was cool, being the age I was. He was the Black Avenger.
Right.
So I was the Southern Avenger. People knew who the Black Avenger was. I'm the Southern Avenger, and I'm saying stuff not far off from what he's saying, except he was more harsh. So
yeah, and sometimes I think people don't understand who have not been in broadcasting, especially radio, where it is theater of the mind.
Sure.
That you lean into a character. Like when I was doing my show at Sirius, I had a persona of like this horrible curmudgeon. Everything was miserable to me. People who meet me know that I'm not a curmudgeon, right? I'm pretty laid back, but if someone ran into me in a bar, it's almost like keeping kayfabe, right? You're going to sit there and you'll be like, "Get away from me, you miserable prick! I don't want to talk to you."
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to be so deep into your character that you answer in character, and at times you don't really realize the ramifications of what you just said. And at times now you're a certain age, like you said, maybe you're in your 20s or early 30s. You're into this character. The radio station's doing well. They like you. You have you on. You've got your fans. People are calling in.
Right.
Because you're getting attention. Now your band is doing better because they're promoting your band song, whatever. You've got that symbiotic sort of relationship on that front. It becomes very easy, I would think, where Jack Hunter became the Southern Avenger and vice versa. Like it wasn't a distinct character anymore. Is that what happened, do you think? Or am I super psychoanalyzing this to death?
I will say two things. The things that were lifted that I said that were, advertised in the original Washington Free Beacon story in 2013 were some of the most extreme things I said, and they were few and far between. I'll say that. But what you're saying is also absolutely true. When the FM station went away in 2007, because the nature of radio, especially privately owned, which it was at the time, I immediately transferred over to the talk station, which made more sense than being on the rock station. I was a political guy.
Right.
And I ditched the mask. I still had the Southern Avenger moniker because that's what everybody knew me as. And I didn't.
It's your brand.
Right. I didn't consider it negative. But when I went to talk radio, I intentionally was less like what you just described. In fact, the biggest compliment I would get from callers is, you listen to us and don't try to talk over us like Mark Levin does, because he was on our station at the time. But I was like, I don't want to be that anymore. I don't regret most of it. It was campy. It was a freaking rock station. I mean, we're not trying to have – it's weird that I was ever on it in the first place and that it worked out. But I don't regret it because I don't know if I'd be doing half the things I'm doing now if that wasn't my career trajectory, if that makes sense. I regret some of the things I did.
I understand that, yeah.
But yeah, people in radio do that. It's funny. I'll be watching cable news, listening to radio. I can tell sometimes, and you probably can too as a broadcaster, when somebody's ran out of ideas, but they know they have to keep talking.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
At this point, but they can't stop. So yeah.
Yeah, and so like and that's what I meant when I said initially when we started this podcast is I could see a lot of what happened to you could have easily happened to me because now I wasn't in the my show was a sports show, so I had less of an opportunity to delve into controversial issues. So what's the worst thing I'm going to say? I think so-and-so is going to get traded. It's like,
Right.
it's not the end of it's not earth shattering. But being that you were referring to politics and to touching on maybe race relations, it becomes very, in my mind, I could see very easily where someone who was trying to lean into a character, trying to be funny, trying to be shocking, because let's face it, that's what Howard Stern did. That's what Opie and Anthony did. That's what Mike and Mike did, right? In that era, right? So I could very easily see that getting away from you and not wanting to say, hey guys, it's an act, because that kills your brand, right?
Right.
And the thing I wanted to sort of draw parallels to is the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys, what they became is vastly different, I think, from what they were when they started. They started out as a gag on Anthony Cumia's show with Gavin McInnes. It was a gag. They were making fun of one of their producers, and because he liked to go to musicals and it didn't have a girlfriend that anybody knew, so they would insinuate stuff and say, "Oh, be proud of your boy." And it was from a Broadway musical, right?
That's funny. I didn't.
And then
know
they.
that.
Yeah, that was the origins. I was
I'm
actually
sorry.
in the studio when they did that, because his studio was across the street from my office at the time. So every so often I'd pop in, and they had that. And look at what it's become now, and to what level it has departed from what it was, right? I would think that anyone in your position probably. So when I read it, and then we'll sort of segue into this. You did mention that you were outed by the Free Beacon, the Washington Free Beacon.
Mhm.
And it was at a time when you had gotten a gig with the Rand Paul campaign, correct?
Which is why all this happened, but we can get into that.
Yeah. So at that point, though, did you feel, or let me backtrack a little bit. Was this something that the Free Beacon, when they were doing their investigative journalism, did they ever reach out to you for comment?
Yes.
Or did they just say, ha, gotcha, here's this libertarian, blah, 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 and he's got this racist working for him, I'm assuming is the tone that they were taking.
Yeah, and I don't want to say outright. I've been told by people it was Oppo research from one of the other campaigns. I completely believe that. That's what they do. If I had information about somebody like me and I'm with Rand Paul about somebody we don't like, I would have done the same thing. That's politics.
Sure.
So I'm not mad at that. The reporter who did the story was a woman I met at a DC mixer who I thought was kind of cute. I thought we might be going out on a date at some point, but that's not how things turned out. Mutual friends. We all knew.
Yeah, it wasn't quite the date.
Oh,
it wasn't quite the date you had in mind. Yeah,
completely different. And she had reached out for something, and I was at a conference or something and sort of dismissed it because I'd met this person and knew them personally. And then right before the story came out, got the hard, "Hey, this is coming out tomorrow. Do you want to comment?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." I didn't understand what was going on. And that's my fault.
Right.
Reading the email thoroughly enough because I was too busy wanting to get down to the cocktail bar at the conference I was at or whatever. But the Washington Free Beacon is a neoconservative publication. You know your audience better than I do. Just neoconservatives within the right wing that would be Nikki Haley right now. Chris Christie is certainly that. Bill Kristol, the Weekly Standard. They're the warmongering, very hawkish part of the GOP. Rand Paul was considered a front runner pre-Trump in 2016 when he was president. I was working in his Senate office. I'd worked with him on his first book. I'd worked for his father's 2012 presidential campaign. I was on Team Paul all the way, and gladly so, and still am, even though I don't work with him directly, but we still, keep in touch, and it is what it is. But anyways, the Free Beacon's candidate would have been a Marco Rubio or one of the hawkish candidates. That nobody saw Trump coming at this point. He was there, and we all drop out in 2 months, and it was going to be a joke, and obviously it was not. But they were worried about Rand Paul. Lindsey Graham ran that year, and Politico did a whole story. Lindsey Graham's target, take down Rand Paul. He's a hawk. Not Lindsey Graham is, not Rand. So here was low-hanging fruit in me. We could say that Rand Paul is sympathetic to the Confederacy and a secret racist and all this stuff that absolutely wasn't true, but they didn't need to get him. So that's why they did that. About 3 years after that, it was discovered that Lindsey Graham had his chief of staff, I think, was the editor of Southern Partisan, which is a staunchly pro-Confederate magazine. One I used to read when I was, doing the League of the South. And it's anti-Martin Luther King. where you want to go. There was no story about that. One of my closest friends, Jim Antle of the Washington Examiner, wrote a story. He was at the Daily Caller at the time. He's like, why is this not a controversy about this dude who works for Lindsey Graham? He's working for him right now. And he worked for this magazine for years. And he's like, what the Jack Hunter controversy, was that about foreign policy in the Republican Party, or was it about what Jack did? And he goes, I think we can drop that BS now. It's about Hawk wanting to take down a non-interventionist. So that's by the way, that's not, I'm not excusing like I didn't do anything. I own up to what, yeah, but I'm also not going to say I did things that they said I did that was just complete BS. So
yeah, and I mean, reading contemporary stuff that came out, I do applaud you for owning up to it, and you did resign. You were like, if that's what it takes, you know, for the Rand Paul campaign, and you did say, look, I was young, I said some stupid things. I don't believe you ever said you were misguided. You said, look, I said some stupid things. They were abhorrent. I've evolved my thinking since that time of the League of the South days and the Southern Avenger stuff, and yeah, I said it, you owned up to it, but you're like, look, I was a kid. I've grown up, essentially. That's the impression I got from when I read your piece, when I read about, you know, that you were like, hey, man, we were all kids at one time. Can anyone here say that at 18 they were as mature as they are now? You know, that sort of thing. And I have to say, I kind of, in retrospect, felt for you, you know, because there's people that if you've been in this world, there's people you understand are making an intellectual point, and there's people you understand are just horrible people. And I think one of the problems the Libertarian Party has, and I don't know if you consider yourself, we could get to this later, member of the Libertarian Party or the Republican Party, but libertarians in general tend to be thrown into the same pot as actual racists, as actual white supremacists. They get thrown in the same pot because those people, the white supremacists, the ultra nationalists, they use libertarianism's points for cover, right? So they'll say horrible racist stuff, and then they'll turn back and say, well, I'm a free speech absolutist, that's why I'm a libertarian. And then all of a sudden a whole bunch of libertarians get tagged with being racists, right? Or if you're trying to make a states' rights distinction, you get thrown in, well, he must have supported slavery if he thinks Lincoln acted unconstitutionally, right? Do you feel that's a big problem going on right now? That libertarianism suffers from that to some extent, doesn't it?
It has
not the philosophy of libertarianism, right?
It has at certain periods, and it depends on who's making those accusations. You know, people on the left, and I think this is getting a little better, at least it's being taken not as seriously. You know, 3 years ago, like everyone that wasn't them was a white nationalist. Like Mitt Romney was a white nationalist, according to them. With the libertarian thing, I remember Charlottesville, the disaster, that tragedy, where the one died in the white nationalist march and all that. A bunch of us libertarians, including me, some people from the Cato Institute and Reason and others, signed it's not a petition, but we signed a statement because some people were saying, oh, this is a Unite the Right white nationalist rally where these white nationalists and libertarians are going to be. We're like, no, this has nothing to do with us. We wanted to be very clear about that. But then you had some people who were like, well, you shouldn't sign that and accept the Washington Post definition. I had this debate with a libertarian friend of mine that we were accepting the framework of our enemies, like these establishment press, saying, well, this is that. We just shouldn't accept that. And there's an argument for that. But my counter argument was, well, you know what? I'm a big wrestling fan. I go to a wrestling fan convention in Charlotte once a year for many years, and I've developed friendships with the people there. They know I do politics for a living. Some might be right, some might be left, but that's not why we're there. I was contacted by one of these people, who happened to be black, who saw Charlottesville, was shocked, and was like, hey, Jack, some people are saying this is libertarians. I know you're not like this. Is this what this is? That's why I signed that statement, not because of the Washington Post or New York Times.
Right.
It's important to do that because people don't know. He didn't know. He knew me. He knew I wasn't like that. We were cool. He thought I was cool. He's like, what is this? Where's the disconnect? And I explained it to him. So I think it's important to be forthright about that stuff sometimes. But at the same time, there is, you know, when Hillary Clinton was running in 2016 and said anybody that follows Trump is a deplorable white nationalist, that's stupid. I know plenty of people, my family and friends who voted for Trump who are not that. So you don't accept that
Yeah.
either. But yeah, to answer your question, it
Yeah.
can be a problem, but sometimes it's more of a problem than it should be because we let it be.
Yeah. And I'm the first to admit it's a complicated PR issue, right? Because we can't control our own narrative sometimes, as libertarians, because we're always, for example, I hate it when fellow libertarians say we're socially liberal and fiscally conservative, right? Because you're still, I hate it too, because you're defining yourself in the left-right paradigm, right? I
Right.
always say you're either for individual liberty or you're not. You're either a statist or you're not. So because not because I'm trying to be, like a prick and just be argumentative. It's because I think there's a distinction, right? There's a distinction. Like I came to this realization 25, 30 years ago, which is like, I will never vote for another statist. I may or may not vote for the Libertarian, but I will never vote for another statist because there is no lesser evil. We've been accepting the lesser evil for so long that we don't know what evil looks like anymore. So to me, Trump or Clinton, Trump or Biden, couldn't care less. They're both equally statist to me. So I couldn't care less about one or the other. And I know that I refuse to accept that. But at the same time, I have noticed, for example, a lot of far-right nationalists who initially may have gone for Trump are starting to infiltrate local libertarian politics because they want to eliminate the spread of libertarianism between the Republican and the Democrat. There was a big meme in the Biden election in 2020 where if it wasn't for libertarians in, I forget the 5 states, but there were 5 key states where the difference between Biden and Trump was the libertarian vote. Mm. And I think ever since then, there's been this concerted effort to convince libertarian voters that there is a lesser of two evils, and it's always going to be whoever's running against Trump. So I think we have to be aware of that. I mean, to that extent. And when someone says I'm a libertarian, like, no offense to you, because I know on your Twitter handle you say libertarian conservative, right? Mm-hmm. I think those two are not compatible. Personally, I don't think conservatism as it's defined today is compatible rather with libertarianism. I don't believe in the label right libertarian, left libertarian. I think that's just the right and left status trying to co-opt a little bit of libertarianism. It happens from the left too. The move to say that Tulsi Gabbard was a libertarian. Ridiculous, right? Because basically the only issue libertarians would agree on is the anti-war stance that she has. Everything else about her is basically socialism, right? The same thing with RFK. People just agree, I think, with this vaccine nonsense. But other than that, what's libertarian about it? What could be construed as libertarian? Do you see that happening? Or am I just being super paranoid? Like, do you think I don't know if it's concerted or not, but there seems to be this pattern lately.
So you and I might disagree on this. I'm a libertarian because I think libertarian solutions are best in most situations. But I'm not such an ideologue. Mm-hmm. I think they are always the right answer. Going back to our discussion about Lincoln, did he do unconstitutional things or extra constitutional things or even inhumane things? Yes, he did. There was also this thing called slavery that was very inhumane and certainly not about individual rights and all that. I'm not going to defend everything he did, but I'm not going to condemn him or his legacy and what happened on the other side of that either, considering what was being done. Is that a perfectly libertarian way? It's not. I'll even go further. The Civil Rights Act of 1965, when Rand Paul got into office or was running for office, I guess once he won the Republican primary, he had to make his announcement that he was running on Rachel Maddow. Why was that? No conservative host wanted anything to do with the son of Ron Paul, who was unknown at the time. He wasn't going on Sean Hannity or Fox. They wanted nothing to do with it.
Right.
It was full Bush-Cheney war mode. So he went on there once he won the Republican nomination, and that was him and Mitch McConnell against whoever the Democrat was going to be and not against other Republicans. Maddow hit him with the question about the Civil Rights Act of 1965. Now, the traditional libertarian answer, the Barry Goldwater answer, which he never came off of, was unconstitutional. You can't tell businesses what to do. Well, listen to my accent. Think about the part of the country I'm from. from a pure libertarian constitutional perspective, I can agree with that. I was arguing with a black libertarian friend at the last Young Americans for Liberty conference about this. Who
Right.
still he's like, no, it's wrong. If you're a black person in 1963 and you're going on vacation with your family and your daughter has to pee or your wife's hungry and you can't go to this restaurant or this stop, you can't use this bathroom on this stop, you can't do this. Plus, there's the KKK, they might be the local sheriff, and a whole host of things. You have to have a green book to show you, as a black person, these few places
Right.
you go to do basic things that America. Do I get mad at the Civil Rights Act of 1965 in that context? No. In retrospect, what else do you do? That's not the perfect libertarian answer. As it relates to concurrent politics and what you were saying about left and right libertarians, conservative, I like the point Justin Amash has always made. Conservative can mean anything in any era. Trump era, it meant something different in the Bush era, it meant something different in the Reagan era, Goldwater, Nixon, whatever. But traditional conservatism, as it was understood by Russell Kirk in the National Review, stick to the Constitution, limited government, individual rights, that's a pretty libertarian agenda. And he always says that he sees no daylight. Justin Amash's favorite thinker on all this is F.A. Hayek. He sees no daylight between traditional American conservatism, as I just laid it out in a broad sense, and basic libertarianism. And I've always agreed with that. When we talk about left and right libertarians, I think it's sometimes a necessary thing. I am pro-choice. A lot of people who've been libertarian for decades who are like, I'm socially liberal, but economically, fiscally conservative or whatever, and I hate that too. They still argue this at Reason and other places, and I'm friends with most of the people there, that you have to be pro-choice to be a libertarian. This is a very simple thing. You either think you're talking about one person or two people. And if you're pro-choice, you think you're talking about one person, and that's totally logical. And if you're pro-life, you think you're talking about two people, also logical. I try not to argue about it much.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the whole argument. I find, as somebody who's worked in politics and worked for Senator Paul and worked for Ron Paul's presidential campaign, I try to find where people are and get them to move in my direction. If you ever read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, that's the genius of that book. He starts with, we don't believe in nothing. We believe in zilch. But here's this thing, and at the end of the book, you're like, maybe you got a point about this stuff. I try to do that with politics. So if you're a Republican and you're in the Tea Party and you want to cut spending, why do we spend all this money? Well, you know how much we sent to Iraq? Man, we shouldn't have done that. What did we get out of that? They wouldn't have been in that place 10 years prior. You're getting at. Suppose Trump, you got a lot of stuff to work with. I didn't vote for Trump. I voted for the LP candidate. And I am a small libertarian, not a big L. I voted for Gary Johnson and Joe Jorgensen. As a matter of conscience, I didn't think I was doing anything. I couldn't vote for the other people.
Right.
But
same here. When
Trump stands on a debate stage in my home state of South Carolina, which is Bush country, absolutely, and tells Jeb Bush to his face, your brother lied about WMDs. He killed all these people. He's a liar. I mean, stuff that Ron Paul would have seemed calm in what Trump was saying. And my state elects him president after he said that, and all the Republican honchos are like, oh, he's done. I'm going to work with that. I'm not going to be like, oh, well, he does all this other stuff I don't like. I will talk about that too, and we'll criticize him. But the stuff I do like that's coming from a mainstream Republican contender that is 180 degrees different from the guy who preceded him, I'm going to use that. I think Rand Paul has navigated the Trump era by allying with him on things like that. And, why is the FISA courts the way they were? They were spying on you, President Trump, in a way that enough people don't appreciate. To just shut him off and be, oh, I hate him, and be Jeff Flake and just be out of politics. What did that get Jeff Flake? You know what I mean? I think Rand did it better. And I think it's important to do that stuff. Meet people where they are.
I mean, I can see that. And I think what you're discussing, what you just mentioned, I think it's a little bit different than what I was trying to put across. Because, for example, you mentioned Justin Amash. I love Justin Amash. And I will say that I view him as a man. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him, but I think he's a man of integrity because he had his whatever do not cross line, red line in the sand, where if the Republican Party went past certain things, he had no problem voting against them. He had no problem abstaining, right? To the point where he said, I know this is going to cost me my seat, but I'm switching to the Libertarian Party while I'm still in Congress. Because I cannot abide by And I think he ended up voting with what, 85, 90% of whatever the Republicans voted for anyway, right? But my point is, I view him as like, if there's any such thing as a political role model, and I abhor politics, it's someone like Amash who had that sort of integrity. Trump, now I personally detest Trump, just being a New Yorker, having seen him live his life pre-politics. Sometimes, what's that old joke? Pick your favorite dinner, steak dinner, all the trimmings and everything, right? You love steak. If someone brings it to you served on the garbage can lid, you'll still view that steak not as your favorite dinner now, right? Because it was served up in such a horrible way. So that's the way I kind of view Trump. Is he right on certain things? Absolutely. I do agree with him, but it's presented in such a horrible manner. I think he does dog whistle to undesirable sections of this country in terms of not people, but ideas, that I personally can't stand him. I mean, get someone else in there. You don't need a Trump for that. But if you were to go down his policy checklist, I could probably agree on some stuff. And I'm not too ashamed to say that, right? But I'd rather have somebody else in there. He's too divisive. He's too polarizing. I had Ilya Soman on as a guest on my other podcast, and we talked about it. And I do end up thinking that he probably did conspire to commit insurrection, not so much with the January 6th events, but everything surrounding it, putting together legal teams and replacing electors and all that stuff without changing the subject. So but I think what you and I are having is a much more nuanced debate than what seems to be the more political strategy of, we need to weaken this libertarian vote because we think it's siphoning from the Republican ticket more than it's siphoning from the Democratic ticket, which analytically is wrong. Libertarians tend to siphon from both candidates equally in most states. But I think the perception is, because I've had my friends, like, John, you cost Trump the election. And I was like, well, first of all, yay me if I did. But I don't think that's the case, because it's not the case that were it not for the LP, I'd be voting Republican. That's not the case. I would be staying home. My vote would be to either write my own name in or stay home. But there is that perception, and having that perception out there, I think there is this movement, and I'm not 100% sure if the current LP National's in on this or not, to sort of unify the Libertarian and the Republican parties in certain key states. And I find that troubling as a Libertarian, because I think there are bright lines. Some things there's overlap. You're right. Like a traditional conservative, like a Goldwater or a Bill Buckley. Like, it's interesting, when I would talk to Bill Buckley, we could agree on a lot of stuff. And it's interesting that on some points he was more libertarian than I was.
Right.
Like, in my younger days, I was pro-drug war, right? Because I grew up in the Bronx. I saw what drugs did to people. So I was part of that, like, let's stop the drugs, right? Yeah. Bill Buckley's the one who convinced me that it was like a losing play, right?
Yeah.
But other things I didn't agree with him. His Catholicism, his imposition of morality on people, his morality on people, even though well-intentioned, I thought was completely wrong. So that's where I see this sort of, like, you and I can sit and talk for a couple of hours probably and have a lot of nuanced debates about libertarianism, republicanism, conservatism. But I'm afraid that there's a large chunk of this country that doesn't have that nuance. It's sort of like, libertarians will let us say whatever we want, so let's say the most horrible shit we can because we can. They will not object to it. And I don't know if that's the case or not in your perspective, but I kind of sense that happening.
I mean, the libertarians I pay attention to, when horrible things are said, while we defend their right to say it under the First Amendment, we also say it's horrible. We certainly do that in base politics.
Right.
We make a point of doing that.
Right.
About our politics in general, you mentioned earlier, like, libertarians fascinated with Tulsi Gabbard or RFK Jr. I came to libertarianism not because I read Human Action, though everybody should read that book or any other similar book. I came to libertarianism because in 2007, when Ron Paul ran for president, I was a youngish Pat Buchanan anti-war conservative. That's where I was at. And in the Bush era, if you were that, there were like 6 of us. So, like, I quit. I was on the radio.
Right.
I quit calling myself a conservative because they're like, "Oh yeah, Dick Cheney, let's go." I'm like, "Nope, that's not what I'm talking about." Once again, conservatism meaning different things. So when I, as a Pat Buchanan anti-war conservative, and war was my top issue, still is, We can talk about some of what's going on now if you want to.
Sure.
I see the oldest guy in the race, who's not even a great speaker or anything, get throngs of people coming to see him, young people closer to my age than, whatever was going on with Rudy Giuliani. And he's anti-war and he's saying this stuff on TV. I'm like, that's my guy. I knew who Ron Paul was, but when I saw he was in it, I was like, oh, 3 people will vote for him. Maybe I'll be one of the 3. That's what I thought was going to happen. But
Right.
what I saw is these people rushed to him because it was different. He seemed like he opposed the establishment. He was a disruptor. You saw that lady later with Bernie. And by the way, I became a thorough libertarian after seeing that and being interested in that and then learning more and thinking more about these things.
Right.
But later with Bernie Sanders, it was the same thing. They saw a disruptor, somebody who was against the system, wasn't part of the establishment.
Right.
And I don't agree with Bernie on most things, maybe foreign policy at one time pre-Ukraine, but that's about it. Tulsi Gabbard, who I like and have met, she's a disruptor. We agree with her on foreign policy. RFK Jr., if he's talking about the Israel situation, I want to pull my hair out. And when he's talking about all sorts of other things like free speech, I'm like, right there with you, guy. And I think it's okay. When Ron Paul ran in 2008, the number one person a lot of the Ron Paul supporters wanted to run with him and be his VP was Dennis Kucinich. Do you remember that? It was like, Paul Kucinich.
Yep.
Dennis Kucinich is a progressive Democrat who agrees with Ron Paul on the war issue, and that was the predominant issue at the time. So I see no problem with libertarians or anybody else being in coalitions with these people or even liking them. It doesn't bother me. I don't care about who's the purest libertarian. What does that get you? I care about getting to the next point and doing libertarian things. So I have no problem with these figures if they come in and out. If I don't like a lot of what Tulsi's saying right now about the conflict in the Middle East, but I've liked her on plenty of other things before. It is what it is, and it's not new. This has been going on for a very long time and will continue into the future. I like a lot of what the squad says right now. I don't have anything in common with them.
Well, I got to tell you, I hear you, but I think it comes down to what your personal line in the sand is. I think that's what it comes down to everybody, right? I mean, I can compromise on some issues, like Larry Sharpe here in New York. When he was running for governor, I agreed with a lot of what he said. I disagreed as a pure libertarian. And again, full disclosure, I'm less of a political libertarian and more of a libertarian purist, right? Yeah. I disagree with a lot of what Larry said in terms of his policies. Not a lot, some of the things. But they weren't the things that were enough for me to say, he's not a libertarian, he's not libertarian enough for me, because 90% of what he said was good. Did it get us 100% of the way I want? Like, I want to get rid of the Department of Education. I want to get rid of school boards, right? I want to bring everything into the community like a good libertarian. Larry's still on that edge, right? But Larry understands that New York, a blue state, will never go for that. Right. So maybe the first thing we do is loosen up the budgets, have it follow the student instead of the school, that sort of thing. Get it away from the school construction authorities, which are nothing but mafia-run units, right? Let's get it away from that. So I can deal with someone like that who says, look, we can't get 100% of the way. That's unrealistic. Let's get 50% of the way. I'll work with those people. I am less likely to work with single-issue people. Now, you mentioned abortion before. To me, that's the most unsolvable political issue. We'll never get to the bottom of that, right? But I'm assuming, much like yourself, I'm pro-life libertarian. I have not a religious backing for that, but I just think philosophically sound positions for that. I also understand libertarians who are pro-choice.
I do too.
Like yourself, I tend not to argue about it, right? But just about every other issue, I'm willing to have a serious debate on. So I understand that. I'm just like, I don't know, maybe I'm being cynical. I think there's something underlying that's just purely political and not necessarily trying to bridge or to build bridges between libertarians, conservatives, and other people. Anyway, so before we get too far into this, and I've enjoyed this, but we don't have several hours, or maybe we do. I don't know. Let me push this along a little bit. Let's touch on some quick issues here. Israel-Hamas conflict. There's a lot of what you see now that's in the U.S. pro-Palestinian. You still have the pro-Israel, but they tend to be the old guard right now. Tell me what you think about that situation, and do you find the response in this country a little bit surprising or not? Did you expect this type of pro-Palestinian support in the U.S.?
Among younger people, I did. saying you support Hamas is something disgusting that I didn't expect to the degree that it's.
Mm.
I mean, I expected some, but like that's just crazy. I mean, that's like me.
Right.
This is what some people say. This you asked my opinion on this. I am not in favor of crushing children in Gaza right now who've done absolutely nothing. I'm not in favor of Hamas slitting people's throats in Israel who've done absolutely nothing. But there are people in the U.S. who will say the Hamas terrorism was bad, and it was, and I just said so. But here's why it's okay to crush those children in Gaza. How does that make you any less of a terrorist mindset than the other? And that's what people get past. I'm against all of the slaughter going on there. I'm also against, this just came out of the blue on October 7th, unprovoked, and these people have just been living the greatest life in Palestine with nobody oppressing them or nothing bad happening, and all of a sudden some crazy people went crazy. I don't like that childlike view that we've had. The same with the 9/11. We were talking about the letter to America from Osama and all that. Lots of bad things happened in the Middle East at the hands of the U.S. that preceded that. And when it happened, what were Americans told? They hate our freedom. They don't like blue jeans and rock and roll. That's just stupid. So what I think about what's going on currently, the violence needs to stop. Did Israel have every right to retaliate? Absolutely, they did. They could not do that. Is that targeted strikes? Is that special ops? Or is it what they're doing right now? Because I don't think what they're doing right now is making Israel safer. Sure as hell it ain't making America safer. And it's morally reprehensible. I think the French president's already called for a ceasefire. That's what needs to happen. If that's controversial, then so be it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with what you said. The one thing I'll also put out there is that I don't think the two sides are equally wrong historically. But I will say this: Israel, whether it was intentional on the part of Hamas or not, Israel is losing the PR battle right now. Even if their actions are justified, they're losing the PR battle. Bombing that Orthodox Christian church. Right. I understand. Like, if I take them at face value and say the space under the church was being used as a terrorist headquarters, I understand that. And it's not far-fetched to me, because we do know that has happened. That Hamas, in the old days, the PLO, they did use, in essence, human shields, right? I mean, I don't think that's a disputed point. But man, you had to figure out a better way to do it. And if for no other reason, if you were one of the coldest SOBs on the planet, you should have realized that the optics of you bombing a church with civilian casualties, innocent civilian casualties, not aligned with Hamas, that wouldn't make you look horrible, I think, is being short-sighted on the Israelis. And they can't count on the cover of the U.S. just from a perception point of view. So I'm stunned that they aren't picking up on. Now, it could be that Israel says, who cares what you guys think? We're surrounded on all sides by people that want to annihilate us. So we got to do what we got to do. Yeah. Maybe that's their perception. But to me, it's a PR issue, as well as like the horrible human loss. But I think just strategically, if you were to look at, if I'm Israel, I'm like, why am I got to figure out some other way to do this. Like you said, maybe it's special ops, maybe it's some sort of weird embargo or something, but like, why do this? I don't know. I don't get it.
A couple of things there. And I agree with what you're saying about the PR. I mean, it's getting worse for them by the day. Something that's just personally aggravated me for weeks. Obviously, the worst part, as with 9/11, is all the death and destruction. The worst part is Israeli slaughtered by terrorists. The worst part is innocent civilians in Gaza, children being killed. That's the worst part. The second worst part to me, what allows you to do what I just described, is the refusal to recognize what you're doing. I was pro-choice in my early 20s because I was a young guy. I liked girls and wanted that option. Didn't think much about it, right?
Right.
But as I became the anti-war Pat Buchanan conservative, was around more people, and this was in the Bush era, I would be like, oh my God, look at all these civilians we killed in Iraq. But why did we bomb the school bus? I would hear conservatives say, casualties of war, stuff happens. And I'm like, will you just dismiss it like that? Like they're not real people? And I started to say to them, like, 16-year-old girl made a mistake. She needs to take care of it. They're like, no, she can't. What the hell's the difference from your description of that school bus? That's what made me pro-life. I'm like, I can't dismiss life in either scenario like that. If a woman is incest or rape and you have to have an abortion, You do that, you allow that, but you're recognizing that that tragedy has led to this other tragedy you have to commit. If you are attacked and you're Israel and you have to retaliate, there will be civilian casualties. You recognize we hate that this has to happen, but it's going to happen. You don't say, as Israel's president said, Herzog, I'm not talking about Netanyahu, that there really are no innocent civilians, that they're collectively guilty.
Right.
You see, that's like saying the 16-year-old. It's the same thing to me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It shows
it's dehumanization.
Yeah, it shows a callousness.
It's dehumanization.
Yes.
If it's the Holocaust or 9/11, these aren't even really people. We can just dismiss it. Let's kill them. And that's what's going on with Gaza. And I can't support that any scenario. Any scenario. I don't care who's guilty, who's not. If you're a combatant, fire away. That's what you're there for. But like some 3-year-old who can't spell Hamas, can't say Israel, doesn't know what they're going on, and they just got their head lopped off. And no. And to the degree that so many American conservatives, and some are speaking out against this, Candace Owens for one right now, are just like, yeah, go get them. Level them, says Lindsey Graham. Finish them, says Nikki Haley. You're not pro-life. You're anti-abortion. You have no problem with human life that whimsically. So maybe I got off track there.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I think it's it's one of those viewpoints that, by the way, for the most part, I agree with you. The only distinction I draw, without assigning moral superiority to other side, is I tended to think, at least in my youth, that at least I think the Israeli side wanted a solution of sorts, whereas I think the other side did not. I think the other side wanted to be left alone, but they didn't want a viable solution for a two-state solution, because I think every time it was offered up, there was always an excuse for not doing it. So I don't think they're morally equivalent. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jack.
The reason Hamas exists is because Netanyahu and others in Israel kept funding them and supporting them, because they're thinking the Likud party did not want a two-state solution. If what represents Palestine is so extreme that nobody would ever want a two-state solution with these folks, that's good for us. And you see what that got you. Hamas does not want a two-state solution. Yasser Arafat in that era, and Reagan officials are going over to meet with the PLO. That was a possibility then. But Israel's government now has made sure that wasn't going to happen by empowering Hamas and whatnot. And that's not to say that the Palestinians aren't sympathetic to that too. But the current Israel government does not want a two-state solution. That's the only way this is ever going to happen, is when both sides can arrive at that.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think, look, how many thousands of years has that area been a hotspot? Like, it's not a modern problem, right? It's been there forever. Okay. I think we pretty much covered the Ukrainian war. Here's the one, and we'll do it like very quickly. Don't need to get too in depth on this. Do you think there's any reason for Trump to be disqualified under the 14th Amendment from running for office?
No.
None at all.
No, but yes, to the degree that everybody who's ran for president in the last 50 years, you can find a reason to disqualify them under the 14th Amendment. I think, once again, I didn't vote for Trump. There's things I hate about Trump more than I like, but if everybody's looking at these charges and all this stuff, I don't think I heard you say it earlier, I don't think to the degree he incited anything on January 6th, it wasn't intentional, and it's giving him too much credit. So he's either the dumbest guy in the world, or he's this methodical guy, and I don't think that's true. I think he knows how to work an audience, and that's a success, and that's about the extent of his talents.
Yeah, no. I like I said, I don't think anything on January 6th necessarily is insurrection. And I'm not even talking about the New York charges or anything like that, but I like very specifically to the charges of the Georgia charges, I think are the ones that are the most problematic to me. The whole sort of like, let me lean on this Republican Secretary of State to quote, find me 11,000 votes. I think that's problematic. I think it's problematic that they had, and again, it's a conspiracy charge more than anything else,
right?
To replace legitimate electors with fraudulent electors, and the clause of the 14th Amendment that says committing fraud, like insurrection, fraud is a form of insurrection if it disrupts legitimate government activity. So, and I've had law professors try to explain to me what is the mechanism for disqualifying someone under the 14th Amendment? Because that to me was a mystery, quite honestly. Like for, what are the other things? Like you got to be 35 years old to be president. You have to be a natural born U.S. citizen, right? Yeah. Those are easy checklists. But let's say someone runs for office who's 34 or 33. How do you actually disqualify him? Like, what's the mechanism? Do you take him to court? Is there some sort of federal agency that's right? It actually turns out that it's based on each state. That each state, someone in each state who has standing, would bring a lawsuit with the Secretary of State to say this person does not deserve to be on the ballot because he's an insurrectionist.
Right.
So I'm thinking, like, are there some blue states that could present that case, make a compelling case, and have that? Of course, you always run the risk of it becoming so purely political or perceived as being purely political that every election cycle you're going to have, to your point, governors of states in the opposite column saying, much like we're seeing with impeachment now, right? Like we impeach Trump, that means we have to impeach Biden now.
Right.
Now it'll be tit for tat. Nobody ever has a clean slate, right? So while I do think, personally, I think there is a good case for insurrection. I know there's debate about it, but at least I think there's a decent argument to be made. But it's interesting to me. So, but I appreciate it when someone says no. I don't think that's the case as well.
I don't want to go that road with every election cycle, and that's just what we do now. Rand has said this a million times, like with the special committees and special count. Are we just what we're going to do from the time? I don't want to see that.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either.
Never not do it. We want to hold these people accountable too, but so much of it is just nakedly partisan. I don't consider what happened on January 6th an insurrection. I consider it a bunch of dumb people running around the Capitol acting like jerks. There was no coordination there, nothing that was going to overturn the government or anything like that. It wasn't another state or anything like that. Who was running around by the Capitol yesterday? That wasn't an insurrection either. If the right started saying that, we're like, oh, it's an insurrection. The people who went, I'm like, no, it's not. It's a bunch of idiots who breached something they shouldn't have breached. They charge them with trespassing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, I think, like I said, the January 6th thing, I think, is less that because, listen, I don't know what was in the head of each individual group that day. Like, for example, I don't know if the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys and those guys had coordinated under some harebrained scheme like, hey, if we kidnap Mike Pence, he can never certify the election, which is, again, a false premise. It's based on faulty legal theories and all that. But I don't know what was in their head. So I can't speak to that. I'm not going to say one way or another. I figure let the courts work that out. I don't think Trump is guilty of insurrection based on that day's activities. I think, again, it's more like the Georgia stuff where it's like, hey, we met in a back room and we decided we're going to push this lie that we really won the election. And in doing so, we're going to send all these fake electors, fraudulently picked electors to Washington under the guise that, well, they represent the real Georgia results. I mean, that's clearly a conspiracy because that's not something you just, like that 12 guys pulled out of their butts to try to do. That was like a coordinated effort, right? So I think it's different there. Whether ultimately it turns out being that, like that he gets nailed on insurrection for that, I can't say. But I certainly don't want to hear the excuse that, well, he's running for president, so we shouldn't even investigate him. He's running for president. He's a candidate. He can't be hauled in front of a judge. I think that also is too far on the other side. Like running for office should not be immunity against criminal charges, right?
That's not what I'm saying. So, and you've obviously paid attention to what's going on in Georgia far more than I have. You can probably tell by my attitude. I just dismiss a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, you dismissed it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was listening to Glenn Greenwald, who I'm a big fan of. I watch his System Update show most nights, and he was talking about this, and he had said something I'd never heard. Some report about something happened in Georgia that was underreported, that was told to Trump, and he got in his head that was 11,000 missing based on this other report, which was legit, but nobody's talking about it because the narrative is get Trump. You see what I'm saying? We've got a national media that still pretends like they didn't suppress a Hunter desktop story. Like, it's still Russian disinfo. You have Adam Kinzinger, members of Congress, and the press will go along with it. Nobody presses it or looks into it. So if that's what's going on, and that's the narratives I'm being given, yeah, I'm distrustful of most of it. So all the things that are being done to Trump right now, you could do all of them to Biden a lot. And there's no political incentive to do it. Merrick Garland's not going to do any of it. So what do you do? Is Trump being singled out? Yeah, I don't even like the guy, but that's plain to see to me. And that's going to help elect him if he wins again. It's stuff like this. I really believe that. I think they're playing with fire.
Well, it's also human nature. If someone's a pain in the ass to you, you're going to target him more. That's just human nature. And I mean, we do it in our own lives, right? If you'll forgive someone's sins if they're generally likable people, right? You're more likely to hold them accountable for the same sin if the person's an asshole, right? Like you'll just be like, and look, whether you like or love Trump, no one can deny that he can rub people the wrong way. He has a very abrasive personality. Being a native New Yorker, I say this with no malice. He has a typical 1970s New Yorker personality. Like, F you, get out of my face. You're too slow for me, right? Like, I have that attitude too in a lot of things. So I could see that, but that's okay. We're here for a lively debate. That's okay. All right. It's that time of the show, Jack, where we move on to something called silly questions. There's no right or wrong answers to these. I'm just going to toss them out to you, and you tell me what comes to mind. Okay, number one. And I think you kind of touched on this. Milton Friedman once said he was a big R Republican and a little L Libertarian. Could he possibly have been talking about you?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a registered Republican. I just vote different, but maybe. I tend to vote Republican for very libertarian candidates, of which there aren't many.
There you go. Okay. Number two. Silly question number two. Which wrestlers are on your pro wrestling Mount Rushmore?
Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes. We talking about personal taste or?
Yeah, no, for you. You're Mount Rushmore.
Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and probably the Rock and Roll Express tag team. I grew up in the Southeast. I'm almost 50. I know you might have some WWF. I like Iron Sheik and Bruno and all that stuff too, but that would be mine.
Yeah, I was going to say Ricky and Robert. You could definitely see the old school NWA in your choices. Good stuff there. Well, personally, I would put Flair in there. You have to put Hogan for what he did in terms of promoting the business.
Stone Cold.
Look, I'm gonna combine two guys. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna say Gorgeous George and Superstar Billy Graham, just for like that flamboyant nonsense that they did. And listen, you have to have balls if you're Gorgeous George in the late 50s, early 60s doing a gay gimmick.
Yeah.
In those wrestling halls. I mean, crazy stuff. And then on a personal level, because I worked with him a lot, Sergeant Slaughter. Just because, like, growing up, I had business with him, so like I got to know him and everything. So I'll put him on my personal Mount Rushmore. Okay, cool. What do you think about wrestling these days?
I watched all.
What was that?
I said I was making a joke that Slaughter protected us from Cobra, but I watch. I'm an avid watcher. I quit watching WWE for a while, a couple of years ago, because I just thought the product was stale. I really got into All Elite Wrestling. It's my favorite wrestling, but now I'm watching WWE avidly again since Triple H has taken over and made it pretty damn good. It's not stale. I watched, some of the smaller leagues, but in some ways, it's like the radio station I was talking about earlier, how we consume movies and music. Things aren't phenomenons, national phenomenons like they used to be. I mean, you have exceptions like Taylor Swift or something like that, but Hulkamania is probably not going to happen again, but there's a lot of people still watching wrestling right now. They're making big and bigger right now than they were even a couple years ago. So, yeah.
The one thing with today's wrestling and it's been this way for like, say, 10 years, 15 years, maybe. I thought the most powerful storylines were the ones that ran for a year, for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then the heel turns, the face turns, those had more impact if you truly believe. Like, as a kid, to me, nothing broke my heart more than when Larry Zbyszko turned on Bruno.
Right.
Because that was like a 2-year storyline almost, where here's the loyal student, Bruno's treating him like a son, and then one day Larry takes a chair to his head, and it was because he realized he could never beat his mentor. It was like all this great psychology. And the one criticism I have of today's wrestling is all the storylines seem to get wrapped up between pay-per-views. There's no like 1 year story arcs anymore, at least none that I know of. So that would be my only criticism. Certainly the athleticism is off the charts now compared to the old days, but I don't know. That's the way I feel.
There is one example of what you're talking about that's happening right now. It's the Bloodline in WWE. Roman Reigns. He's been champion for 3.5 years or something, and his brother. Okay. That's been going. That reminds me of like Dusty and Rick going at it for 4 years when I was a kid. Like that's what you're talking about. That is happening in WWE right now. It's all Triple H. So I agree.
Awesome stuff. And I know he does have a sense of the old school. I mean, he was trained by Killer Kowalski, right? So I mean, he probably has that old school psychology somewhere in his head that he's drawing upon right now. And I'm glad to hear that it's working out nicely. Hey, Jack, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Probably Star Wars, but I'm not big on either of them. I have friends who are absolute Star Wars freaks. I'm just a man of a certain age who grew up in the United States, and of course, you got to like Star Wars. I thought
Star Wars. Okay,
I thought Luke Skywalker and Han Solo were like Bo and Luke Duke in space when I was a kid. Blonde.
I never thought of it that way, but I guess it makes sense. All right. Hey, Jack, one person alive or dead that you'd like to have dinner with?
Probably Russell Kirk.
Okay. Hey, listen, no explanation needed. You already told us why that guy is great for you. Yeah, Russell Kirk. Okay. All right. And the last one, F, marry or kill? AOC, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You got to kill MTG, even though I agree with on a lot of stuff. She's just wacky. F, Boebert. I guess I'd marry AOC. I mean, there's no good choices, which is the point of doing this. But
yes.
Yeah, I guess that's what you've reduced me to. That's what I do.
Fair enough. All right. Jack Hunter, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Everyone, give everyone rather your socials, your contacts that you want them to visit to learn more about you, Jack.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. Jack Hunter74 is my handle. Jack Hunter74 on Instagram. And you could read my work at Base Politics. It's based-politics.com, where myself and my friends Brad Palumbo and Hannah Cox churn out information and news every day.
And folks, he's a great follow. Take my word for it. Follow Jack.